Good afternoon. My name is Ed Bernard, and I serve as chair of the Financial Accounting Foundation. I'd like to welcome our stakeholders tuning into this virtual meeting. Thanks for joining us. Today's meeting will include reports from the FASB Chair, the GASB Chair, the FAF Executive Director, and the FAF Treasurer. We'll also receive reports about the latest activities of the Financial Accounting Standards Advisory Council and the Government Accounting Standards Advisory Council, as well as a report from the Trustees Standard Setting Process Oversight Committee. Before we get to those reports, I'm very pleased to announce the appointment of Brad Hendricks to the Private Company Council. Brad's an associate professor of accounting at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill Keenan Flagler School of Business. He's a CPA and holds degrees from the University of Utah and the University of Michigan. Brad will succeed Michael Minnis, who joined the PCC in January of 2018 and whose second term will conclude in December of this year, and we're certainly grateful to him for his service. The board also reappointed to the PCC Robert Messer and Doug Ewell. Both members joined the council in January of 2021 and will serve their final term ending in December of 2026. We're pleased that they both agreed to stay and serve additional terms. With that, let's move to our regular agenda. The first item of business is to approve the minutes from the board's May 9th and May 10th meetings. May I have a motion, please? I can't see. Thank you. A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. We'll now move forward with reports from the FASB, FASAC, GASB, and GASAC. So with that, for the FASB report, Rich.
Great, thank you, Ed. Since our last meeting in May, we continue to make good progress on our agenda, and many important investor priorities have reached or are about to reach important milestones. I'd like to spend the next few minutes providing you with an update on some of our activities. We've added a project to our agenda on induced conversions of convertible debt instruments, and we've also issued exposure drafts on multiple projects, including purchased financial assets, a key standard setting output from our CECL post-implementation review, an ED on accounting for profit interest awards, and just recently an ED on disaggregation income statement expenses. Our team here refers to that project as DICE, and I will say that that responds to one of the most frequent requests from investors that we received during our agenda outreach initiatives. And in addition to that, the board has also directed the staff to issue final standards on joint venture formations, segment reporting, and disclosure improvements related to SEC disclosure requirements, all of which should be issued shortly. As noted in our prior quarters, the progress on our agenda is all in response to the extensive stakeholder input we receive as part of our normal process, but it was added to based upon the extensive agenda outreach initiative that we had earlier. I look forward to updating you on our continuing progress at future meetings. Turning to our post-implementation reviews of the revenue recognition, leases, and credit losses standards, we continue to fine-tune GAAP guidance in these areas. We've issued numerous standards as a result of what we've learned through the PIR process, and we continue to monitor those standards as a means of identifying areas for improvement. As I mentioned earlier, those efforts led to the aforementioned ED on accounting for acquired financial assets. And I'd also like to note that last week we issued our third annual investor outreach report. This report helps to provide additional transparency into all of the activities we partake in related to getting investors' perspectives on standard setting, our existing projects, as well as what we should be working on. That report is available online on our website. With that, on behalf of my colleagues on the board, I do want to thank you for your continued support as we pursue our agenda, and I look forward to hearing any questions or comments. Ed?
Any questions for Rich? And I'm scrolling back and forth between two screens, so please bear with me.
I see Lynette, Ed.
Lynette, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Rich, you're about halfway through your tenure as the FASB chair. Can you share any thoughts about your accomplishments so far and what stakeholders might have to look forward to?
Sure. And I would mention there are accomplishments of our entire board, because nothing gets done without a majority of our board. But you are right. I'm 3 years into my 7-year term, so I have an undergraduate degree left. But as I look forward to it, what do I expect? I think we have a great agenda. I think it was shaped by the extensive input from our stakeholders. And I think it gives our board information, and we're moving forward on that agenda. And so I think you'll see us complete many of the projects on our existing agenda. But I think you'll also see us adding to it. We have a continuous outreach process, but occasionally, such as at the start of my term and next year, we're going to do an extra effort there on agenda outreach with our stakeholders. So I think you'll see us repopulating that agenda. But again, our agenda at the end of the day is driven by our stakeholders. It's them participating in our process, telling us what's most important to them, and us understanding that and how that can improve financial accounting and reporting. So I believe that's what you'll see through the rest of my term.
Thanks, Rich.
Rick.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Rich, for the update on FASB. I'm always impressed with the creativity that FASB goes through when it does its outreach. And of course, one of the ways that you do outreach is your roundtable discussions. And I noticed that there's a roundtable discussion, I think, scheduled later in the year on the income statement expense disaggregation project. And what goes in? How do you guys determine when a roundtable takes place, and what do you think is going to come out of this one?
Sure, and great question, Rick. It really comes down to the judgment of when we think it really makes sense to get in person our stakeholders to talk about an issue and talk about a solution. We get lots of great input from them on an individual basis, but sometimes I think getting different stakeholders from different backgrounds to sit around the table and talk about what the issue is, see if we can get agreement on what the issue is, and talk about different solutions is very helpful. And our DICE project it's unique. Because when you think about our standards, we have 5 volumes of standards in our print edition. Most of those developed with a focus on the balance sheet. And when they talk about how something should be recorded in the balance sheet and how it should be disclosed. But we have an income statement which reflects the changes in those balance sheet accounts. And the disclosures there weren't necessarily developed with a focus solely on the income statement. What we've heard from investors is, as they're using that statement, they need better transparency into the items that make up the expense categories on that statement. That was the genesis for the project. There's certainly some costs that would be incurred from a preparer perspective to the extent we finalize that project. And I do think it's important that we get those stakeholders together so they can talk about different approaches and different ways that we could possibly pursue achieving our objective, provide those investors with better financial information.
Thanks. Mary Barth.
Rich, I know you like to refer to your agenda as moving expeditiously, which is great to get things done and serve investors' needs. In the past, you've explained to us about how the board thinks about its cost-benefit analysis when it issues a particular standard. Could you comment on the extent to which the board thinks about aggregate costs and benefits when it issues multiple standards in relatively quick succession?
Sure. And Mary, that is a great question, right? Because at the end of the day, we are looking at the costs and benefits. And that's to all parties, right? It's the benefits to investors, it's costs that investors bear with or without information. And very importantly, it's the costs and benefits related to the preparer community also. So as we work through our projects, one of the things that I think we've done, particularly on our agenda, as you look at it today, is we've taken a very targeted approach. We've spent a lot of time with investors to make sure that we're focused on the information that's most critical to their investment decisions. And we've targeted our standard setting to that. And I think one of the benefits there is that better enables us to get that information into the hands of investors on a timely basis. I think it also reduces the costs versus a wholesale revamping of certain standards. It allows us to focus on that most critical information. And the final byproduct of that, though, is that we can move through those projects a little more quickly because we don't have that scope creep that sometimes occurs when you add a project that isn't targeted as you explore lots of different options and lots of different things, sometimes items that are not as important to investors.
Thank you. Manju.
Thank you. Hey, Rich, you've often talked about your constant communication with ISB. Would you mind commenting on FASB's current relationship with ISB and how, when you're developing new standards, how each board kind of looks to each other where it may make sense?
Sure. Great question, Manju. I think we, as a board, we recognize there's a global economy out there, and there are two different standard setters. There's us for the U.S. and there's the ISB for other countries. We also recognize that sometimes the issues we're facing are global issues. We regularly share the information on our projects and on our research with the ISB staff and vice versa, recognizing there's no border to a good idea. If a good idea originates somewhere else in the world, we're more than happy to look at it and consider it, and vice versa. That dialogue is regular. It's between our teams. It's between our technical directors who have biweekly calls. And in fact, this September, we're having another joint board meeting with the ISB board. That's an opportunity for our full board and their full board in a public venue to talk about projects on our agendas, to share information so that we can all work towards that goal that we all have of improving financial accounting and reporting.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Rich? If not, we'll move on to Mike Morrow for the FASAC report.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My report can be found in tab 10 in your materials. That report includes activities through the end of June. I'd like to highlight some of the recent and upcoming activities. Going back to that June meeting, it was in person, included discussion on 3 topics. The first was an update on the board's technical agenda on segment reporting. I've got an overview from the staff on that topic. The second topic was on the board's technical agenda project on the accounting for and disclosure of software costs. Council members discussed and provided input about potential improvement for software costs, including the development of a single model to account for costs, to internally develop, modify, or acquire software. It was quite a lively discussion, I would say. Overall, council members were supportive of the project objectives to modernize the accounting for software costs and enhance transparency about an entity's software costs. Council members provided specific suggestions about various aspects of the potential model, generally supported additional disclosures to provide transparency about these costs. Specific feedback related to the probable threshold for recognition and unit of account in the potential guidance, noting that both would require an entity to apply some significant judgment. Council members also provided input about potential guidance for costs incurred after a software project is substantially complete, noting that distinguishing costs that are for maintenance or enhancements could be difficult and would require judgment as well. Some investor council members specifically stated that the information about total software costs would be useful. They noted that they would like to understand how software costs are recognized and presented in the financial statements, and expressed concerns about the potential lack of comparability of that information. Also indicated that the information that differentiates between types of software could provide decision useful information. However, they acknowledge the difficulty in making those distinctions given the wide variety of types and uses of software. Council members also discussed whether obtaining the information needed to provide the potential additional disclosures would be feasible and what information would be most useful. Some practitioners stated that some of the potential disclosures could be challenging to audit. The last topic was an update on select FASB projects, and also I gave them an update on some recent FAF Trustees activities. During the session, the staff provided an update on progress on select projects. Council members also were provided with an update on the recent FAF trustee activities, including recent enhancements to shareholder feedback procedures and transparency and oversight of the standard setting boards. As part of our planning for discussion topics for future FASAC meetings, we've updated and included our longer-term outlook for potential topics for 2023 and 2024, which is in the appendix of your materials. We welcome your input on these and any other topics that you think FASAC should consider. At our upcoming FASAC meeting in September, we anticipate the key topics will be the FASB's process on cost-benefit analysis, disaggregation of income statement expenses, an update on that project. We've had substantial discussion throughout the evolution of that, and also improvements to income tax disclosure. We recently solicited nominations for FASAC vacancies for terms beginning in January 24 through our open nomination process. We have quite a nice roster of potential members for FASAC. While the requested nominations to be submitted by last Friday, August 18th, if you have any additional candidates you did not have a chance to share, we'd welcome any additional suggestions in the next week or two. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Wow, lots going on, Mike. Thanks. Any questions for Mike? Okay, great. Seeing none, I will move on to GASB Chair Joel Black.
Thanks, Ed, and good morning or good afternoon, depending upon where you are. It's great to see everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to update you on the GASB's activities. During the second quarter of 2023, we issued our 2023 update to the implementation guide, which included 6 new Q&As for leases and the first 3 Q&As for subscription-based IT arrangements, which is GASB 96, and all of our governments will be implementing that standard in the 2023 reporting year. So we hope that implementation guidance is helpful to them in those implementations. Additionally, in the second quarter, the board approved the technical agenda for the second third of 2023. That approval included the addition of a new project on infrastructure assets. That project follows a couple of years of pre-agenda research on capital assets, where we heard that capital asset accounting and reporting by and large was working, but there were opportunities for improvement in the information related to infrastructure assets, which is a big category of capital assets for our state and local governments. That project will look at the potential to change recognition and measurement of infrastructure assets all the way to potentially new disclosures related to those assets, as well as preservation and maintenance cost related to the assets. It's important to note, and Beth Pierce might address this in her GASAC report later, but this was the highest ranked this year's prioritization project by the GASAC. The second highest ranked project was the GASB focusing on electronic financial reporting, which we continue to devote some staff resources to, and beginning working on a financial statement taxonomy that we think will be a significant addition to the government accounting and financial reporting community as technology evolves how governments report their financial information. We continue to make good progress on all of our projects. I will highlight one major decision that the board made related to our financial reporting model project, where the board voted to remove the proposed changes to the accounting and financial reporting of governmental funds from the project. That decision resulted from the determination that the intended conceptual consistency that the changes we were proposing were meant to achieve would ultimately not be achieved because of exceptions and complications that were necessary in the model we were developing, so that the resulting information would be better information than the current model. So the board felt like where we were, the costs were no longer justified when compared to the overall benefit that would be achieved from the change to a different model. So we voted to take that out of the project. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Thanks. I see, Andrews, your hand's already gone up.
Okay. Hey, Joel, you just talked about a major change that the board made with respect to the financial reporting model, narrowed the scope by removing governmental fund accounting from the scope of the project. And I know it was a very thoughtful deliberation on part of the board and reasons why that needed to be done. Could you tell me a little bit about how the stakeholders have reacted to this decision by the board?
Sure, Anju. I would say vast majority might be an understatement. Really, basically all the stakeholders that I've talked to, whether preparers, auditors, or users, have been very supportive of the board's decision. I think that they believe that we listened to their feedback and we made a tough decision, but they all seem to feel like it was the right decision. So the feedback has been very positive.
Good to hear that. Thank you.
Great to hear. Mary.
So Joel, as an academic, I was very happy to see that the GASB and GASAC held their recent meetings in conjunction with the American Accounting Association's annual meeting in Denver. And you were the luncheon speaker for the AAA's government and not-for-profit section. Would you comment on how productive you thought this interaction was from your perspective?
Sure, Mary. We thought it was very productive. I had a number of board members who felt really engaged with an important stakeholder group of ours by going out and kind of taking the show on the road, so to speak. And I also heard from a number of AAA members who were very appreciative that we were there. A number of AAA members came in and observed the GASAC meeting that we had on site at the conference. And we had a lot of good interaction with the academics and discussion about how they can work with us and we can work with them to improve and try to achieve our mission better. So I thought it was very productive, and all involved seemed to appreciate the engagement.
Great. Sounds like a great effort all around. Rick.
Well, thanks, Ed. Joel, you mentioned the taxonomy project and potentially moving into that. Can you tell us do we have enough resources to tackle that, or will you be needing something in addition to tackle that kind of project?
Sure, Rick. Well, it depends on how soon you want it to be done, right? I think that we essentially probably have 2 FTEs spread among 3 or 4 people that are working on that now. And if you compare that to what it took on the private sector side to develop and now maintain a gap level taxonomy, that's not nearly enough. And so I think that if we're going to speed that up, we certainly need to think about budgeting more resources in the future. We wouldn't want to take away from our other standard setting priorities. So that would mean addition. So I think that's something we will contemplate, but again, kind of depends on how quickly we need to or want to achieve an ultimate taxonomy.
And just to follow up on that, Joel, the pace of that and the role of GASB depends on some decisions being made by others as well. Is that correct?
Sure. To the extent that the financial data transparency involves a financial statement taxonomy, which is still up for decision by the SEC, but potentially is an option, that would definitely speed up the need for a taxonomy. And if we would continue to engage with the SEC, and if they choose to engage with us, and we need to meet a 4-year, or less than that at this point, time frame, certainly we would need to speed up rapidly.
Yeah, so my understanding of your current posture is to try and stay on the front foot so that we're making some progress, are aware of what the path forward would look like, but we also have to balance that with other decisions to be made before we go into it in full force, if you will.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Joel? Manju.
Just a question similar to what was asked of Rich. Joel, dawned on me that you two are approaching your halfway point. So do you have any comments on progress to date under your leadership that you'd like to make, and what might stakeholders expect in the near future?
Yeah, thanks, Manju. I would say ditto to Rich. He and I follow the same track, so I have an undergrad degree left, just like he does. And it's the same, right? It's the whole board that is making these decisions. I think that we have done a really good job of listening to our stakeholders, understanding the resource constraints and burden that our changes place on them, and being sure we set a high bar for meaningful improvement if we're going to take on a project and issue a standard. With that said, we've got some important projects that we think are or do have the potential to have meaningful improvements to government financial reporting. We will continue those, and we should be able to issue some pretty big standards before my term ends. So I look forward to that, as well as these advancements in understanding how technology is shaping government financial reporting, and us being sure that we have achieved and are in the appropriate place as a standard setter in this kind of new evolved realm of financial reporting. I think it's something I hope we achieve, although it will be ongoing by the end of my term.
If I could just say on behalf of the trustees, and certainly I agree with both of you in acknowledging it's the entire board and frankly, the staff that move all the work forward. But we're very grateful for the leadership both of you provided in the last 3 years, and delighted that the window of your continued contribution still includes 4 years or an undergraduate degree, as you put it. So we look forward to more progress, and thank you for what you've done so far. Any other questions for Joel? And if not, Beth, if we could go to you for the GASAC report.
Certainly. And before I start, I want to reiterate what was just said about GASB and Joe's work. The relationship with the stakeholders could not be better. It's just, he's done a great job working with GASAC. GASB staff has. It's been a real partnership. And I just want to say thank you to Joe, the staff, and all the GASB members. It's been refreshing, and it continues to improve. So you're doing great work, and you're making it even greater, I guess, is a way to describe it. So thank you very much. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and my full report is included in your meeting packet. GASAC held its second meeting of the year on August 7th. And as Mary pointed out, that we did do our work in conjunction with the American Accounting Association. Each year, the GASAC convenes its meeting in conjunction with one of our stakeholders. Again, this year it was the AAA. We did have the opportunity, as was been mentioned, to attend the American Accounting Association, and in that vein, we had a couple of seminars that I highlighted in my report on page 3, where GASB staff, GASB alumni, and GASB members made presentations in combination with AAA members. So it was a very good collaborative effort, and I do want to say thank you again to the AAA. One of the overall themes of the annual meeting and conference was to address the need to encourage students to take up a career in accounting, in our case, governmental accounting. Comment was made that if you looked around the room, there were an awful lot of baby boomers there, and not too many young folks in the audience that had just started their career, and that is going to have an impact on government accounting and the capacity of governance to continue to do the work as we are putting out GASB statements. And there is a strain now, and that's been apparent. It's one of the comments that comes up frequently in the emerging trends section of our GASAC agenda. Moving back to the specifics of the meeting, GASAC provided input to GASB on a number of projects, the risk and uncertainty disclosures, the financial reporting model, which both Joel and Manju Ganeri-Walla mentioned some of the issues and frankly the courage that I think GASB displayed in that process. Going concern uncertainties in severe financial distress, infrastructure assets, classification of non-financial assets, and pre-agenda research for subsequent events. GASAC noted that one of the highest priority items that we had was infrastructure asset, and as Joel just mentioned, that was added to the GASB agenda. That goes a long way to making it clear to GASAC members and the constituencies they represent that their voice is being heard. GASAC as a body continues to improve its outreach and effectiveness. On page 3 of my report, there's an outline of some of the decisions made by the executive committee, and they reflect a commitment of GASAC members to increase engagement. In addition, we continue to work with stakeholder groups to identify new opportunities to expand constituent input into the review process. That concludes my report, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Beth. Like Mike, lots of activity. It's just terrific to have these advisory councils to work with the boards. Any question? Oh, I see, Manju.
I don't have a question, Mr. Chair, but I do just want to make a comment that, Beth, we are grateful to you for your leadership of GASAC and your efforts to increase participation among members and in instituting strategic evaluation of how the body can be better and contribute more. So thank you very much for all the efforts.
So again, I would say it's a team effort, and we've got a great group. And I also want to commend Lisa Parker, as well as the rest of the GASB staff. One of the things that happened this year is that when new members came on board, we had a mentoring program in place for them. We encouraged the mentors to reach out, have conversations after they got their new packages. The new members, they got their first volumes of material. Don't feel overwhelmed. There's a process to this, and work that through. Because of that, because of the orientation session, we also held in some new introduction meetings in January. When we hit our April meeting, when we do the prioritization, when the issues of infrastructure assets as a high priority item, ESG was also mentioned, as Joe mentioned, electronic financial reporting. Those people hit the ground running. These are new members. They were well versed in the issues. They had an opportunity to talk to their stakeholders, and they were able to provide input. I love the new members. I have to tell you, the appointments that FAF made, you guys get an A+. It was really, really well done. So it's a team effort. And again, I really appreciate the support from GASB and Joel and all of the staff.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Any other questions or comments? And if not, the folks on the FAF trustee board that really keep a particularly close eye on the standard setting process is the Oversight Committee. And now we'll hear from the co-chairs, David Lillard and Tim Ryan. And I'm not sure which of you plans to go first.
All right, very good. Mr. Chairman, David Lillard here. And your Oversight Committee was chaired by Tim Ryan and myself, met on Monday, August 21, yesterday, met virtually. And we commenced the session with a public session that is part of the Board of Trustees and the Oversight Committee's transparency efforts led by Tim Ryan. And we had a report during the public session from the GASB, from Chairman Black and Alan Skelton, the technical director. Also a report from the FASB, from Chairman Jones and Hillary Salo, the technical director of the FASB. And we further received a report from the FASB liaison to the Private Company Council, Sue Cosper, is a GASB board member. We also, during our session overall, had a discussion of meeting observations that were given on the PCC by Rick Reisig, who's a trustee. Gave a report on the June 22 to 23 meetings, and also reports from trustee Diane Norton on the FASAC meeting of June 6 and trustee Marion G on the GASB meeting of June 27 and 28. Those were very informative, and we had deliberations around all those reports and questions for the folks involved in them and everything. We also later in our meetings had a virtual meeting with Beth Pierce, the GASAC chair, and many of the same items that she covered here were covered during our review as part of the Oversight Committee effort. We also received a brief discussion with Steve Hobbs, the General Counsel of the Board of Trustees, in regard to the annual review of the risk process and risk items assigned to the Oversight Committee. And finally, we ended with a discussion of the due process correspondence procedure that the Board of Trustees and the Oversight Committee have adopted as part of the transparency increase effort for the board, and received a report that there were no correspondence items to be dealt with at this particular meeting. I'll turn it over now to my co-chair, Tim Ryan, for further remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair Lillard. I appreciate it very much. I just had a couple other quick things. I think you did a great job covering it. I want the public to know that the areas that we continue to focus on is responsiveness to the agenda consultation process, and all of our stakeholders that Rich Jones mentioned. We continue to focus on cost benefit being considered, the PIR process, as well as the staffing, ensuring that the FASB and GASB have the right staffing to deliver on their agendas. And we feel good about all four of those areas. With that, Ed, I'm going to flip it back to you, and we're happy to take questions if necessary.
Thanks, Tim, David and Tim. Any questions for the two of them? And if not, we'll turn to John Auchincloss for the FAF Executive Director's Report.
Thanks, Ed. And as always, it's a pleasure to report to this audience. As many of you are aware, the FAF's 2022 annual report was published on July 12th with the theme of standards that work from Main Street to Wall Street. Importantly, it commemorates the 50th anniversary of the creation of the FASB. And so in the report, we highlighted major milestones over the last 50 years of the FASB board's activities and staff's activities, I should add, as they have worked to earn the responsibility that has been entrusted to them. This report's available in a printable PDF format, but of course there is an enhanced digital version on our website. I would be remiss if I did not note that next year in 2024, we look forward to celebrating the GASB's 40th anniversary. Finally, I'd like to note that this year's annual report includes an update to our stakeholders on the FAF strategic plan, which was approved by our Board of Trustees in November of last year. We continue to make progress against our objectives and will continue to share this information with our stakeholders on an annual basis. As I shared with you at the May meeting, the major work that the foundation completed associated with our publication system and content access project, which included the launch of free access to all stakeholders, has been successfully completed ahead of schedule and on budget. We are now focused on release 2 of the publishing platform, which has been successfully deployed and is on track for a final release in September. The release 2 work will support major enhancements to the functionality of the FASB's accounting standards codification and the GASB's governmental accounting research system, or GARS as we like to call it, and increased automation and system improvements to further the usability, stability, efficiency, and performance of the platform for productions. In addition to the appointment and reappointments to the Private Company Council that our chairman announced earlier in this meeting, the Appointments Committee of the FAF's Board of Trustees continues to make progress in 3 important searches. First, we have a search for a FAF trustee to fill the seat that will be vacated by trustee and vice chair Mary Barth, whose term concludes on December 31st. Next, we are searching for a trustee, a FAF trustee, who will be designated as a governmental trustee and will fill the seat vacated by FAF trustee and treasurer David Lillard, whose term will also conclude on December 31st. And last but not least, we have ongoing a search for a FASB member to fill the seat to be vacated by Jim Croker, whose term will conclude on July 31st of 2024. We have conducted interviews relating to each of these searches over the past several months and hope to be able to announce appointments later this fall. Finally, I'm pleased to share that we've launched our first ever podcast entitled Bridging the Gap. The initial episode, which you can find on our website, features an interview with GASB Chair Joel Black discussing the Financial Data Transparency Act, one of the hot topics in governmental accounting right now. Future episodes will likewise provide a deeper dive into key issues facing the governmental accounting community. We are excited by this new way to communicate with our stakeholders, and we encourage those interested in government accounting to subscribe to the podcast. And Ed, unless there are questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you, John, and congratulations and thanks to you and your entire team on the annual report. It was great. There's a lot of ground to cover. It's well covered, and it's a great service to folks to have it out there. Any questions for John? And if not, our final report will be from our treasurer, David Lillard, on our financials.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The FAF's financial results for the 3-month period ending June 30th, 2023 are located on master page 80 in your materials. Overall, the financial condition of the FAF remains strong. Net assets increased 35.5 million, primarily related to recognition of the entire year of FASB and GASB accounting support fees in the first quarter. Overall, budget results for the period into June 30, 2023 amounted to a $4.01 million favorable variance against the budget. This includes, first of all, operating expenses were $2.5 million favorable against budget, primarily due to salary and benefits for several vacant positions across the FASB, GASB, and FAF, and lower travel and meeting costs and placement and relocation costs due to timing. Also, reserve fund investment income was $800,000 favorable against budget due to favorable market conditions that occurred. And lastly, publishing revenues were $700,000 favorable against budget, primarily due to increase in license fees and 2 months of unbudgeted FASB codification and GARS online subscription revenue with rollout of the enhanced free view at the end of February. In conclusion, overall headcount was 5 below budget during this period, which reflected several vacancies among the FAF, the FASB, and the GASB positions. Mr. Chairman, thank you. That concludes the report.
Thank you. Sounds like we're in good shape. If any questions for David regarding the financials? And if not, this is the end of the public session for today's FAF Board of Trustees meeting. Thanks very much again to those who tuned into the webcast. Let me please remind everyone that the next FAF Board of Trustees meeting will be held on Tuesday, November 14th in Norwalk, Connecticut. Thank you all and have a great day.